I always wanted to have a podcast where I got to speak my truth, share my thoughts and beliefs unfiltered. And so that's kind of where I started. Made a ton of choices, learned a lot along the way. I interviewed a lot of people, and then I got more clarity of how do I actually want to grow my business?
Why the podcast and not any other channel? What made you think the podcast is the way to go?
You get to be what I call
Meet Erin Gray, certified financial planner, heart-centered entrepreneur, and host of the Your Money, Your Rules podcast. With over a decade of experience in business and finance, Erin helps heart-based entrepreneurs find peace, joy, and confidence in their money, combining practical strategy with soul-aligned wisdom.
When I started my podcast, I was interviewing estate attorneys and CPAs. And so I just love the interaction, and I get to share my outside the box thinking with you. Some, it may resonate with you and it may not. Both are okay. I want to continue to share my message. I want to impact millions of women and men around money.
Big part of podcasting, in my experience, is consistency. You need to keep on showing up. You need people to know when to expect a new episode. So how do you keep that consistency?
I think that there's something potent.
Erin, can you please tell me the story of Your Money, Your Rules?
It originally started with Generate a Life Well Lived, which is what my business name is. But then because I always wanted to have a podcast where I got to speak my truth, share my thoughts and beliefs unfiltered. You just start, right? That's just what I did. I started. I made a ton of, if you want to, air quote, I don't think there are mistakes, but I made a ton of choices, learned a lot along the way, and then got some more clarity. I interviewed a lot of people, which I love doing, interviewing. And then I got more clarity of how do I actually want to grow my business? So this year, the beginning of this year, January, I decided, and it has always been that way, is I want it to be through my podcast. I think it's a way, it's very intimate. You're in someone's ear for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, however long your podcast is, once, twice a week, depending on how often you're doing it. It builds trust. It's how I've hired a lot of the people that I have worked with. And you get to be what I call, real, raw, and unfiltered. And so I got more clarity on that. And I'd always talked about business and money and self-development, but really kind of niche down, as they say, to really talk about money, mainly money, but I talk about it from more of the spiritual, what I call the 5D lens. I come from a background of finance and financial planning, and that's very 3D, but really where I have made strides in my life is really on the spiritual and the energetics of money.
Okay, there are so many things I want to follow up on here. I'm going to start by the end. When I think about money, I think there is nothing more real and physical, although of course there is digital money, but you get me, than it gets, right? Money is literally you have €1, €2 or dollars, or you don't. How do you make the link between the spirituality aspect of it and, money itself and how to manage money? How do you link those two worlds?
Well, I think that coming from someone who has done all of the 3Ds, so I think that's mainly the people that I help, is they are people that have money, but they don't have the energetic and emotional concept of someone who is abundant and wealthy. And that was my experience. So I had done all of the things that everyone says, at least in the Western world, says is going to bring you fulfillment and all of this stuff. And so money in the bank, cash, investments, all of that, but I didn't feel wealthy. I felt very scarce. And that determined a lot of decisions that I made. And I made a lot of decisions from fear. And so when you're talking about, well, how do you yes, you do want to pay attention to your money. You do want to manage your money, but it has to come from the energy of sufficiency and love and enjoyment and expansion. Those decisions are very different than when you make them from fear and scarcity, overwhelm, pressure, rushing. And that was my experience up until probably 5-6 years ago.
What changed 5 or 6 years ago?
I had a panic attack. We were flipping a house. And I remember sobbing on my bed and being I can't live the rest of my life like this. Looking back now, I recognize, right? I thought, and there has been a tape that's been on repeat of one of the thoughts that continues to come up in my head is money's going to run out. And when you come from that place of money's going to run out, instead of it circulating, it's always coming back to me. I just wanted to get the flip over with because the feeling was so intense in my body. But what was actually happening and showing me was how deep seated these stories and these beliefs and what I was experiencing in my body that I had not taken care of for 20 years of my working life. So I just worked, I invested, I saved, and unconsciously, I thought that the money in the bank was going to bring security.
I'm gonna get a bit philosophical here. What are the core principles of money in your opinion? The reason I'm asking this is in the title Your Money, Your Rules, I'm thinking, okay, so to each their own, right? I'm half Spanish. And there is an interesting saying about a very famous Spanish dish, which is the tortilla de patata, right? A kind of potato omelette.
Yeah.
And the saying is there are as many recipes of tortilla de patata as there are households in Spain, because everybody have their own.
Yeah.
So when you say your money, your rules, doesn't it mean that it's just up to anybody and everybody? Or are there a core set of principles that you follow and that you try and teach to your coaches? How do you see that?
I see it as it's your money, each individual person's money. It's really God's money, but it's your money and it's your rules, right? It's the way you want to use your money and enjoy your money. And just like you said, in all the different households, your values and how you use and circulate your money and how you grow your money and how you manage your money is going to be different from me because I have different values. And so it's really, if at the core of what I teach is people to trust themselves again, to honor their intuition. We are bombarded by so much information on what we should be doing versus what do we actually want to be doing. And when you start from there, your answer will be very different most of the time because you're actually tapping into what are your heart's desires, what do you want your life to look like versus what is this prescribed way that we have been told looks like success, how to live, things of that sort.
And I love this. So to go back to one of the things you started with, right? The podcast is where you can be raw and unfiltered about your thoughts and how you see money and how you see the theme of your podcast. Money, the way I see it, right, and it's maybe the French culture as well, can be very personal, right? So when you talk about it on the show, when you interview people on the show, this can be, I mean, for some people, it's a touchy topic. Why the podcast formats? Well, I don't know, a blog, for instance, where people could read anonymously and potentially even write anonymously could be, fitting the finance and money aspects of things more purposefully, or at least in a more discreet way. What I'm trying to get to is why the podcast and not any other channel? What made you think the podcast is the way to go?
That's the way that I like to consume content.
Interesting.
It's what I enjoy creating. Like, I don't enjoy sitting down and writing an SEO blog or just a blog. Like, that isn't something that excites me. But sitting down and recording, and when I started my podcast, I was interviewing, estate attorneys and CPAs. And so I just love the interaction and I love humans. And now my podcast is more of single episodes where I'm teaching and I'm sharing my beliefs. But I think that there's something powerful. Like, I like to say that I am very potent. I have strong beliefs, and we all do. And I get to share my outside the box thinking with you. It may resonate with you and it may not. Both are okay. But I think that there's something potent about audio and video.
Amen. So when I look at your podcast on Apple Podcasts, Erin, I see you started in 2023, right? And you have 133 episodes live right now. This is almost 3 episodes per week. How come? Why is that? What is keeping you going? How can you be so prolific in number of episodes that you release? Is that deliberate? Is there a strategy here? Can you walk us through this a bit?
Yeah. When I first started, it was 1 episode a week. And like I said, I was interviewing people. And because I believe that there has to be an energetic match, there has to be and there was only a couple of times, but I would do pre-interviews with people. Every person that came on my podcast was a pre-interview. And if you weren't willing to do a pre-interview, then you were automatically a no. And also too, a lot of times if you had someone booking for you, if you didn't, I'm very relationship based. So there were times that I did not even look at other guests because they have And I know that people, hire out people that, book for you, but there is something about you taking 10 minutes to write an email to somebody that you genuinely want to have a conversation and be on their podcast, because it's not just one episode. It is a relationship, in my view, in my beliefs, in my eyes. It is a relationship that you form with someone over, 30 minutes, an hour. And many of the people that I have had on my show, I still have contact with and have referred people to. And so I consider myself a very intimate person. And so that started with once a week. Then when I got more clear on my podcast, how I wanted to grow it, that became like I doubled down. I was like, okay, I'm going to do 2 podcasts a week. And I get a lot of my show stuff comes from clients and client sessions, things that they're going through. So I know that if they're experiencing it, which I have experienced it, I know other people are. And so that is where a lot of that comes from. And here you go back to heart's desire. When it's a heart's desire, you're willing to keep going even when the results aren't there in the 3D world. Like I know already what my podcast is doing in the world. And maybe it doesn't look like that on the charts yet, or maybe it hasn't, produced the amount of clients yet that I'm looking for. But I know that that is only a matter of time, because like I see it in my mind, it's already there. And so really that heart's desire, I think a lot of people, here you go back to listening to what other people, I don't think I would have kept up with blogs, because it's really truly not like a hell yes in my body. And that is where I make my decisions from now with everything in my life. Like if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And hell yes isn't like, kind of, it's like 100% I'm all in and I'm committed. And so it's kind of like, partnership, marriage, whatever way you want to look at it. Like, are there times that, sometimes I don't enjoy being around my husband? Yes. But am I committed? 100%. I show up every day. Right. So it's the same thing for me with podcasting. Is like, I want to continue to share my message. I want to impact millions of women and men around money. Like, I want you to think about money in a totally different way than we have been taught to think about money. Money just is, right? It's a tool, but so many lower conscious people have used money to break apart families, to not treat humanity very kindly, to start wars, to create famine, like to do all of this stuff. And I'll cry, but I want people to look at money from a place of love and from a place of like, it's here on the 3D world to serve us and to improve humanity and elevate consciousness.
I love this. So it's here to serve us. I love that. It is a tool. Money is a tool. It's not an end. I mean, at least, again, this is how I see it.
Yeah.
And it needs to be used and leveraged to achieve, part of happiness, or, help you grow in your life. But it's not an end, the way I see it, at least. So I love this. Use it to serve you. To come back on you're either 100% in or you're out, Erin. And here I'm going to double down a bit on this. I love it. I love that. Big part of podcasting, in my experience, is consistency, right? You need to keep on showing up. You need people to know when to expect a new episode. Oh, it's Tuesday, 8 a.m. It's my time with Erin. I'm going to listen about money, and I'm going to be more conscious about my money, and I'm going to get better with my money. Now, with the 100% in, whilst I love it, we both know that sometimes it's hard to keep up with episodes. So how do you keep that consistency if it's either all in or not at all? I'm out. How do you keep on going? Is it because there is a bigger goal out there? It's because that's how you've positioned your energy when it comes to the podcast? Like, what keeps you going from 1 episode per week with guests to now almost 3 episodes per week?
It's 2. Yeah. I don't know. It's 2 episodes a week is what I do, Monday and
2 episodes a
Thursday.
week.
And it is devotion. I think people, when you're saying all in to me is devotion. It is a yes. It is, I'm like, I was giving you the example of my husband. I'm devoted to him. Does that mean that when I wake up, and I'm always 100% happy? No, but I'm still committed to being married. I still show up. I still do the things, right? And so with podcasting for me, are there times where, it's like, okay, I've already talked about this before, right? I'm talking into, for some people, I think also if you are someone who is trying, or you're getting your validation from an external thing, like Instagram gives you the likes, or YouTube and that, right? And so all of these metrics that a lot of us have been conditioned to get our inner sense of enjoyment or fulfillment on versus I'm devoted to right now 2 times a week, right? Like if I could get the if you or someone else would be like, okay, well, we could do the same thing with one. Like, I'm not tied to the amount of podcasts per week. I'm tied to getting my message out, and that is the umbrella, right? And how I choose to do that right now is through podcasting. And you don't have anything in front of you. I mean, I guess you could, but like a lot of the times when I listen to podcasts, like I think about YouTube, right? Like YouTube, you have other things that could pop up or like Instagram. It's just like there's other things bombarding you versus when I listen to podcasts, like I'm just listening to them. Yes, you might be doing dishes or you might be going for a run, but like you're focused on that. And for me, that was just something that I just decided like, how do you want to, here you go back to heart's desire, like really getting clear, like how do you want to grow your business? Not the way somebody says to say, but like, how do you want to do it? What is going to be something that you can stand the test of time even when, right, you may not see the results yet in the 3D world.
To tie this with something I wanted to ask you about, Erin, how much should one honor their intuition? Like, when do you decide to follow your heart versus, doing the thing that seems the right thing to do? How do you judge that?
It's always 100% my intuition because I
Okay.
have so much evidence that when I don't follow my intuition and I do what someone says I should do, it never works out the way. And that's not to say that I'm not open to ideas, but I truly have to, like, the way to cut through for my intuition is I always say, if I had $100 million, would I do this? And that for me is an easy way to see, am I doing it for money or am I doing it because I truly want to do this and I would do this for free or like no matter how long it takes. Like if people want to lose weight because they want to look better versus I want to be healthy. So no matter how long it takes, I'm going to continue to eat well and I'm going to continue to exercise because I love my body and that's what I'm going to do. So the short answer is my intuition always, because I have way too much evidence now. It wouldn't have been like that 5 years ago, but I have way too much evidence now. When I trust my intuition, it is the fastest, it is the most effortless way. And that's not to say that, like, you could suggest something to me and then I would run it through my intuition and I would be like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So I'm not opposed to suggestions. It's just I don't outsource my power to anybody anymore, which I used to do that on a very consistent basis.
This is such a good phrasing. I like it. I'm not outsourcing my decision making. So let's tie all this with the business, Erin. Can you tell us a bit more about who is it that you serve, how you help them, and then I'd like us to tie this back to the podcast and how the two interact with each other. But so to focus on your business right now, who is it that you help and what do you do exactly?
I market to women, but I have men and women clients.
Okay.
They typically are either high income earners, have investments, and or have a business. So by society standards, they are wealthy on paper. And they feel very scarce and fearful about their money, which ultimately, when we have it in one area of our life, it is a state of being of who we are. So they come to me for financial, air quote, 3D, like let's talk business talk, financial coaching. But what they get is a nervous system calming. They learn the skill sets of regulating their nervous system to then they change their self-concept and so that they can actually go and do what they want to do, whether that be their business or continue on with their work and do work that they love and enjoy their money and have fun with life. And yeah, I mean, just like feel at peace and calm. Like those are the words that like most of my clients end up like when I ask for testimonials, they say I feel more peace and at calm, not just with money, but like in every area of their life.
How do you, man, there are so many things I want to ask you. So first of all, how do you make that shift from, so you've done it, right? Obviously, 5 to 6 years ago. But how do
Well, I
you
should say I
coach people?
started 5 to 6 years ago. It has been a
Right.
process. So like for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing this work. Yes.
And I love this because this is not an overnight success. Like this takes work and this takes, right, iterations to get there. But when you coach people, I'm going to pick your brain a bit here, Erin, because I feel a bit targeted with this, which is a good thing. So how do you shift your mindset? Typically, when you come from, I don't know, say, random example, low income family and household, right? And now you go on your own, you're doing well, and there is the money on the bank account, but you still feel scarce, right? How do you make that shift? How do you start working on that shift to go from, okay, it's there, and now let's have a fulfilled life, let's have a happy life, let's have a emotionally fulfilling life as well, thanks to money that serves you and not as an end. How do you coach your clients going through this?
So it starts with awareness. And most of my clients have already worked with someone, but it depends on their awareness, right? So if they aren't even aware of their thoughts, they're not even aware with their sensations in their body, then we start there because you cannot change what you do not know is happening. So it's really starting to pay attention to language. It's starting to pay attention to the sensations of your body. And then we go into self concept of like the unfiltered, like if you were just to describe yourself, let's just like go through that. And then what do we actually want to create? What kind of self concept? Because what we
Yeah.
create, how we think about ourselves creates everything in our life. So that is kind of the short, like I say, what you were saying. It's not an overnight, but that's like and it's also processing and feeling your feelings, which many of us don't know how to do, weren't taught to do, and some of us aren't willing to do it. So you have to be willing to feel and feel like I just had a call with a client and I said, let's just start changing the word of discomfort or it feels uncomfortable. It's just not familiar. You're not familiar sitting in this feeling of pressure. We're going to get more familiar. And how we get more familiar is we slow down. Is when that feeling comes up, we don't try to go take action to try to relieve the feeling. You sit with it. And so, like nervous system practices and somatic work and things of that sort to help them work through that because a lot of us were taught if we have the thing, then we will feel the feeling, which is back asswards. It all starts within. And so really starting to elevate your consciousness to that as well of like it has to come from within first. And so reprogramming neural pathways and allowing your body to feel safe, like if spending money has not been a safe activity for you to do, you have to teach the body it's safe to spend and circulate money.
This is good. You know what I think? It almost feels like this is your money, your rules. Take the time to, let the feeling coming in, understand where it's coming from, define objectives, and then move towards that objectives with little steps and small success by small success. Am I getting there?
I think so. I mean, like when I think of your money, your rules, I think of like, you're going to do it your way. I'm going to
Yeah.
guide you, but how you get there is going to be based on what is true for you, right? Like we all are abundant. It already all exists. So we're peeling back these layers to then get
Yeah.
to our true self. But how you get there might be very different than how I get there. So there is no one size fits all. And I say this on my website, there is no one size fits all because I don't know how you feel in your body. You have to sit with yourself and feel what you feel in your body. You have to get comfortable, right? So how you move through something might be in air quotes faster or slower than someone else. Not that we're comparing, but like it doesn't matter, but it's just your nervous system, your body, you are your own unique individual. So how can I sit here and say this is the exact way to do it? It's not. Like it's your way. That's why I said your money, your rules.
I love this. So to tie it back with the podcast, Erin, how does the podcast benefit, if at all, right, the business and vice versa? How do you link the two together?
So the goal, which it's just started occurring, is having people reach out from the podcast. The other thing that I love about the podcast is how I think already, right? Like you're not meeting me for the first time wondering what are my values, how do I, talk about things? Like you're very clear on what kind of like my energy, my belief systems, my values, things of that sort. So you are already like, yeah, I like her or no, I do not. And so you're kind of already and I've given you steps, I've given you skill sets, I've taught you, like I teach in every episode things, practical things you can start doing. Like you could take my podcast and you could literally change your life. It's a lot more fun to
I
work
love
with
this.
me because we have a lot of fun and it's It's just fun, right? Like, I mean, you don't need anybody, right? You don't need any mentor. It's just fun to work with somebody. And it can speed up the process, right? You've got somebody else kind of looking in on things that you may not be aware of, based on your consciousness. So the goal of the podcast ultimately is that is how I continue to grow my business is from that place because here you go back to like the reach is around the world, the impact, right? Like I said, like you're able to take information that I have told you in my podcast and you can start implementing that today. So that would be to impact people, to change their relationship with money, and then to grow my business from that place.
I love this. So, first of all, the principle of giving the knowledge away for free and selling the implementation, I'm a fan of this topic because then if people start talking to you, they are already convinced, basically. The thing in your case, I mean, I'm curious to get your take on this, is I suspect in your niche, accountability is going to be super important as well to be successful with your money, right? So it's one thing to have the knowledge by listening to the podcast and knowing how to do it, but it's a bit like getting in shape to be healthy, as you mentioned. Most people know what they have to do, right? Eat less junk, exercise more, and do it long enough so that you start seeing results. And then it's not about becoming fit, it's about staying fit. So do you see the same thing with money? Like it's one thing to set a bunch of objectives, be on the right path, but then it's going to be another thing to be consistent with it. Say, invest in the stock market every month, a part of your monthly income, and like sticking to your budget and doing this repeatedly years after years after years. And for that, accountability is good, which is potentially what you support on as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have thoughts on accountability
Go for it.
because accountability to me means that you don't have a self-concept that you held yourself accountable. So I do think that there are training wheels in the beginning, right? Like when you are learning and becoming the person and the version that you know yourself to be, it helps to have someone to guide you and to, follow up or check in, but not from a like, I told you to do this. Why haven't you done it? More so like, hey, what is creating, like what stories or beliefs are you telling yourself that you didn't do what you said you would do? Because I have a belief of I do what I say I will do, right? And if I don't do it, because I'm not a perfect human, what was I thinking? Where was the resistance coming from? Like I kind of self-coach myself through that of like, hey, why didn't you do what you said you would do? What was on your calendar during that time? Is it because you really don't want to do it? Was it because of that? Because sometimes that is the case. Going back to like, oh yeah, you said you would, I don't know what I would use, like in the past, like something for my kid, right? But I didn't really want to do it. Okay, well, there's that. So you have to check in. Or is it because are you scared of something? Like really what's going on? So the accountability part is more so, I look at it more so of first and foremost, the self-concept, being someone that you don't need accountability. Here you go back to like, it's just fun to do it. Because I think accountability comes from you didn't do it, so let's talk about it versus it's just fun to be with someone and like, this is what I'm doing and growing and like, guide me. And so it's really up to, here you go back to willingness too. Are you willing? Like a lot of this work is in the body. It's not familiar. It doesn't feel very comfortable in the beginning, right? But the more that you do it, the better you get at it, the faster you recover. The thoughts are always going to be there. It's just how quickly do you bounce back from them? I don't stay in shame for a week anymore like I used to. I don't the money thought comes in and it's like, that's BS. Come on. Okay. Right? But that's not how it was. Like I believed that story, several years ago, 6 years ago.
The reason I love all this and what you're saying, Erin, is because this is so applicable to podcasts, because this is exactly what it is about. Like waking up every week, recording an episode, being consistent with it. Sometimes you will feel less good about it, but you keep on going because you have a goal, you stay consistent, you help more and more people, they come back, and you repeat each and every week. And that's how you get results.
I
So
want to say something real quick.
go for it.
You have to be devoted to something more than money. Because once you have the money, I think that is the sphere that I'm coming from because we have used a large amount of our money over the last couple of years by taking time off. But having that amount of money, I know that when I regenerate that money, it's never going to bring me the feeling. And I think a lot of people live in the fallacy that once I generate and make X amount per month or I have X amount in the bank, I'm going to feel a certain way. It will never bring you the feeling. Maybe temporarily, but it is not sustaining. So you have to decide, going back to podcasting, you have to do it for the love of doing it from a devoted place versus here you go back to that external, like it's going to bring me money or it's going to do this, or those are all byproducts. I'm not saying not to make money. I'm not saying don't like have those people that reach out to you and say, I love what you're doing. That's amazing. But it has to come from you. It has to be devotion because you want it, because you are contributing to something of the greater good for humanity versus for the money or for the accolades or something like that. And when I say greater good of humanity, like you could have a podcast on just playing, right? And that's the greater good of humanity. It doesn't need to be this like spiritual thing, right? You could teach like, I think about my dad, like he could have had a whole podcast on water, wastewater management and teaching people about that. You know what I mean? Like it's just so many. So, but the idea behind it has to be like, it has to come from a soul place. And I don't know how many of us take the time to get to that place first before we just start taking action.
Let's pin this one because there is something I want to get back on. No, but I love this, Erin. So to finish on your podcasts, so one of the things that you mentioned is basically, so you're nurturing your audience, right? You're educating your audience, and some of them start coming to you as potential leads and therefore clients because they are almost already convinced when they get into the call with you. What I was curious to ask you is, do you also send existing clients back to the podcast to be like, hey, so here is the teaching, we work on this together, it's funnier. By the way, you might want to go and listen at this specific episode where I talk about that, and it might, I don't know, hit the brain centers differently. Do you also do that, like using the podcast as materials for your actual coaching?
Because that was also, I mean, thank you for saying that. That was also the thing. It's like, I don't want to have to repeat what something is a bajillion times. Like I've already done it. So go listen to this episode. Or, like with my email community, like PODs on accounts were coming up several times in clients. So I just made a podcast about it. And then I sent it to my email community. And I was like, listen, it came up twice this week in client sessions. So clearly this is something that not everyone knows. So here's a podcast I made about it. Here you go. So yeah, education and like, so I don't have to repeat myself. And then, and that is also too, what I like about the podcast, because my goal is like, I want you to be already in that self-development. Like if you're brand new, for sure, I'm happy to work with you, but it's a lot easier if you've done some of this because we can really start getting some traction when you've kind of already done some of this stuff on your own ahead of time.
Amen to that. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Erin, and I think this is, so going back to following your intuition, following your heart, being committed to what you believe and feel is right for you. There is something business-wise that's happened into your life that's I'd like to ask you about. So you had a multiple generation family business, I believe, right? Or at least your family has that. And you had a path in front of you, which was just continuing on that. And you decided not to. So, you enter into the amount of details that you'd like, of course, but what made you go against the institution, basically, right? You have your family that owns a generational business. You're working there. It makes so much sense for you to take over, and you decide not to, and you decide to do something else and something awesome, right? Between what you're building on the podcast and on the business. But it's so hard to make this type of decision, right? Going against everything that your environment is telling you to do, back to the what people tell you to do versus what you feel right. Anyways, I stop talking now because I want to hear your thoughts and your experience about this.
Yeah, it would have been, if I would have purchased it, it would have been a third generation business. My grandfather started it in 1973. And then my uncles, plural, 3 of them, kind of all bought it together in the early 90s. And then when I came on, my 2 uncles and my father, one of the uncles, they basically were going through a divorce, a dissolution of a partnership. So I came on to that whole thing. And my uncle decided to, because my grandfather owns like 100 acres, his house was just right down the road, which is where our setup was as well. He decided to, and had been underbidding for about a year. And so it was a very contentious dissolution, to say the least. We did court, we did non-compete stuff, we did a whole thing. So I came in 2009 of what I call a shit show. Like it was it affected our family very much at Christmases. So my uncle that left ended up going and opening up the exact same business. I remember my father, he did a type of work in the water and wastewater construction business that not many people do in Central Texas or in Texas in general. And I remember asking him, but I didn't have this language at the time, that he was so angry at and I think there are two people in a business partnership, right? Like, so it's not like my uncle was all at fault and my dad wasn't at all, right? Like, I see where the breakdown happened. But he was so upset about my uncle, and there were things that my uncle that stayed and that my dad stayed, that they were trying to inhibit the growth of my other uncle's business. And I remember asking my father, and I didn't have the word abundant, at the time, but I was just like, why don't you just focus on SCADA? Because you will make so much money. He can't compete with that because he's in a totally different realm. And it was that, because it came from hurt, right? It came from that, like, you really hurt me. So I worked there for probably 10 plus years, almost 11. I kind of phased out. I told him I'm no more. I'm not going to do it. We had been talking about me buying it and them wanting to phase out probably like years, I don't remember, 7, 8, something like that. And I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. I had all of the business knowledge to carry the company, but my dad also wanted me to be a partner with one of the guys that worked there. And I didn't have the language at the time, but energetically, we were not a match. And I was not going to be in business with someone because probably I'd had the experience of, seeing what happened with my dad. I was not going to be in business with somebody that was not an energetic match to me. And so I wasn't going to be on the words I used at the time, the hook for things, right? Like, I had the money, he had the knowledge from the ground level, right? But I always had the belief that I could go and be taught it or hire people that could do it. So probably a couple of years we kind of just like went around of like, how do we make it work? And I just was I don't want to do this. Number one, it's going to keep me in Texas. I want to travel. I want to be able to have a life where I get to travel and I don't work so much. And I would be doing it for the money. I wouldn't be doing it because, oh my gosh, I love this so much and this is so fun. Even though it was fun, like I gained, there's not a lot of people that can come into, a 30-year company and just be fire hosed the amount of information that I was. And I took it upon myself, right? But like, I know so much about taxes that most people don't because I was in it, right? So I'm so grateful for all of the lessons that I learned. How many people with HR and dissolution of partnerships and attorneys and just all the things that I've learned. It was amazing. But here we go back to, like, it wasn't devotion. It wasn't a heart's desire. And I needed to figure out what that was. And I don't want to say the only way, but the way that I needed to do that ultimately came to was for me to take some time off, for me to not work, for me to give myself the space of like, how do I actually want to impact humanity? So the first coach that I hired was to be able to tell my dad, I don't want to work here anymore. And I'm actually going to set a date. Because I remember when I was flipping houses, I remember the lady was like, at some point you need to burn the boats. And I told her, and I can't do that. At that time, I was very disempowered, right? Like, I didn't think that that was an option. I can do it, right? I did do it. It felt uncomfortable. There was grief there. For 10 years, I basically was like my partner to my dad, even though my uncle was in, what do you call it? In name. My dad and I were the ones that bounced ideas off of each other. He came to me for all of I would think that I was just the advisor for 10 years of being in his ear and being like supporting him and empowering him. And so there was grief there that I didn't recognize there would be. I think a lot of people, when you quit something, you think you're going to the next thing, but there's that level of grief that we had a relationship for 10 years and we saw each other and talked to each other every day. And I don't know if he has the words for it or did have the words for it, but he was angry. He was angry with me that I left, even though he said it was fine. And it was fine. I think the anger ultimately was coming from pain, right? It was sadness that, you know what, I'm not going to continue on. I'm not going to be part of, he's always said, you're the closest child to me. Like, you are very similar to me. We get along so well. And I think that there was sadness and grief from that. So having the courage to get to that place, I think then that there's all of this parent-child stuff, right? Like there was the business aspect that we have, but then there was also when it came time, it was like, am I going to disappoint him? And I know that, intellectually at the time you can say, well, like nobody, you feel disappointment. Nobody, nobody makes you feel disappointed. But if you've grown up in a household where you've tried to please your parents and you have gotten and received love because of that, it's a pattern to break.
That was a powerful one. Almost losing my voice over it. Thanks a lot for sharing this, Erin. It's this is true. How was Costa Rica? To end on a very positive note, then.
Oh, I loved it.
Because that's where you
I
went,
learned how to.
right?
Huh?
After when you decided to take a break and like take some time off, this is where you went.
Oh, no, 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 no. When I decided to I started a coaching practice after I left them. Then after 2
Okay.
years of the coaching practice, I was like, what do I really want? I just want to hang out with my kid. So we
Uh,
traveled and
Good
then,
one.
yeah. So ultimately, I did end up in Costa Rica for a couple months. I loved it.
Here we go.
It's probably one of my favorite countries. The people are amazing. I mean, people are amazing everywhere. But we learned how to
That's true.
surf. And yeah, I just think that you really got to tap into like, what do we really want? And what I have realized is what I want doesn't always look like what mainstream thinks you should have. And that's okay.
Happiness and success lies between a couple of hard conversations that you're refusing to have. This is one of the quotes of my mentor. Erin, this was an absolute masterpiece. There is one thing that I ask all my guests at the end of these episodes, which is the following thing. So when Jeff Bezos was building Amazon, right, he was asking himself and the team not what's going to change in 10 years or like what new technology or innovation should we work on for in 10 years, but more like what's still going to be true in 10 years. People are still going to want cheap, fast, good customer services. So let's make sure that we double down on this right now for the next 10 years. We're talking about the Amazon business. For podcasts, what's your take on this? With your experience, 133 episodes, what is still going to be true in 10 years that you feel podcasters should double down on right now to have that success and to optimize for the next 10 years?
Human connection, truth, values, knowing how someone, like how you feel. I would say human connection.
Which is what podcast is about.
Yeah.
So amen to that. Erin, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. If people want to find out more about you, women and men, if they want to have financial advice, where should they go?
You can just go to my podcast, Your Money, Your Rules.
We'll put all the links in the description. Erin, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you for having me.